Welcome to the special City Council meeting for Monday, May the 11th, 2020. We're going to begin with the roll call by the City Clerk.
Councillor Campbell?
Here.
Councillor Carlson?
Present.
Councillor Crowson?
Here.
Councillor Higgin?
Here.
Councillor Morrow? Councillor Miyashiro?
Here.
Councillor Parker?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Kaufman?
Present.
Mayor Spearman?
Here.
Thank you.
I'll now read the acknowledgement statement. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Okay, we'll move on now to the consent agenda. I have a motion from Deputy Mayor Kaufman. Be it resolved that City Council receive the following report as information. Impacts of Ministerial Order MAG 014/20 dealing with assessment and taxation issues and other financial matters, parts 9, 10, and 11. Deputy Mayor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. As members of council are aware, the province of Alberta has been adjusting the legislative timelines in light of all of the public health emergency related to COVID-19. And in particular, there are some changes that require related to assessment, taxation, other financial matters. So the attached document outlines the extended dates, most of them from June until September, but members of council can refer to that. Members of council or the community can refer to that to see the extension.
Yep. Are there any questions from council? I see none.
Question?
Question's been called. All in favor? Are there any opposed? I hear none. Thank you. I now have a submission from Councillor Campbell. Business Improvement Area Bylaw. Be it resolved that City Council cancel all of the taxes imposed by Bylaw 6219/2020, Downtown Business Improvement Area Tax Bylaw, and Bylaw 6220/2020 Business Improvement Area Tax Rate Bylaw. And further be it resolved that City Council fund on a one-time basis the 2020 approved budget of the Downtown Business Improvement Area from the Downtown Redevelopment Fund. Councillor Campbell.
Again, this is all COVID related. It is a request to cancel the BRZ tax levy that has been instituted since 1988. And in exchange, the Heart of the City has their downtown business improvement, or has the Downtown Redevelopment Fund that can pay for the levy for the one time only. I will open it up for any questions that people may have.
Thank you. There are questions. Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so we're talking about canceling the downtown BRZ levy, which was, I think, 200. What was the total amount? I can't. 219,000.
It's approximately $219,000.
Okay, and that's shared amongst the 550 plus businesses. So, but we're not canceling it. What we're doing is we're going to continue to still pay that out of the heart of the city. Is that correct?
Looking at kind of the option of City Council is to consider if they would cancel the requisition of the levy, but because the BRZ's budget has already been approved, the BRZ still needs the funding, and so then it was if City Council decides to cancel the taxes, then there's a funding source that's required to cover off the amount that was already approved.
Okay, so the heart of the city, this will come from the heart of the city money, which, help me out here, the heart of the city money comes to them, their budget, their money comes to them through council, resolution of council, which is taxpayers' dollars. Is that correct?
The proposed funding is basically a reserve that was set aside for master planning for the heart of the city, which they're not currently undertaking, and so it's just a change in use of the funding.
But it comes from the taxpayers.
That's correct.
Okay, so here's where I need to make sure I understand this. So, do all the banks in the downtown BRZ and all the national chains, big corporations, they pay into this BRZ levy? So if we were to do this, am I to assume then that basically the taxpayer is paying the portion for these banks? They're paying their portion that they would normally pay as part of the BRZ levy.
Councillor Morrow, the canceling the taxes and funding the BRZ budget from a different source would be covered from tax funding that was generated from the community, that any business in the downtown BRZ zone would be provided with relief for 2020.
So that funding, if there was no COVID, that funding, this $219,000, would come by the banks, by the national companies. They would pay that fund, and that's where that $219 would come from.
That's correct. The city acts as essentially a requisition. They request how much we should collect, and we collect it on their behalf, and it's distributed for the BRZ funding purposes.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Yep. Deputy Mayor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. To the city manager or designate, I'm not certain if we have the answer to this one. Do we know if the downtown BRZ activities are all remaining in place for which the $219,000 is being requested?
I believe it is. They were asked to take a look at their budget. It's not a large budget. And I believe they have looked at that. And one of the things that could be done is they could come back and do some reporting on that as well if council so wished.
Thank you. Second thing, can we have the dollar figure in the resolution and the second operative clause, if that is possible, please? Thank you. 666. Yeah. We've been ignoring that. And thank you. Are we designating from where? Oh, sorry. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Spearman.
Thank you. Councillor Higgin.
Furthermore, I think to Deputy Mayor Kaufman's point, in the letter, I think that we received from the downtown BRZ, that they were tightening up their expenditures as well, and they didn't have as many outgoing costs, and that I thought the number, and I was trying to search through and find it, it was around, it could bring it down to around that $130,000 or $140,000. Is that, maybe Deputy Mayor Kaufman, is that what you're meaning is bringing that funding down? Because from when I had spoke to a few of the different individuals there on BRZ, having this number here of 219, that's worst case scenario, but I thought I read something around 130 is what they were going to be needing. Is that, or that they're going to be able to cut? And I'm trying to see if that was an email or if it was a conversation that I had with BRZ.
Yeah, it isn't in their formal letter, but I do think, they have committed to take a look again, they're like all of us. This COVID situation has created so many uncertainties, and I think even as it relates to the ongoing, what businesses in the downtown are actually going to be able to sustain themselves going forward. So, and what programs they'll have to give priority to. So I think they have committed to do that, take a look at it. But again, it's just a point in time where, because of the bylaws and the taxes and the tax roll going out, that this is for consideration for council today.
I'm not sure if then the total of, if it's an up to, or I don't know if there's any change that can be done. This is your Deputy Mayor Kaufman? Or no, I'm sorry, Councillor Calm. For a total of 219,000 is, I don't know if I could, if you'd be open to a friendly, or if I could put that in for up to 219,000 in the case that they come back with a lesser amount. I don't know if
I think some of this money is to be recovered because of the inability for some businesses not to pay this time. Is that, if I'm correct?
If council wished, would request a budget to come forward from the BRZ. I just also wanted to mention that Ted and Hunter are here in the foyer if there's some questions that you'd like to ask them as well. But council could request a budget that could come back to council and get approved.
if possible, could I did have a conversation with Mr. Hagee. Is it possible to have him in to ask a question?
Can ask Mr. Cool if he'd like to bring, how much space do we have?
14, I think.
A couple of people could leave and we can get 2 in. Okay. Joe, you can't go. You sit down.
Hello.
Okay.
Sure. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we can make space for Ted as well. Thank you.
Everybody.
Okay, who had a question for Mr. Hagee? Okay, Councillor Higgin?
I just thought if Mr. Stilson wanted to hear as well. Then.
Sure.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Hagee. My question was, we had a conversation about some of this funding and that there's other things that the initiatives that the BRZ is doing to reduce this amount already with some of the different amounts that are not outgoing that were outgoing on a regular basis before COVID. Can you maybe give a little explanation about that?
I don't have exact numbers for you, but we did go through our budget, and most of our budget is wages, which we have Ted and another office person doing marketing, mostly online, and rent for the building, utilities, things like that. There's very little event funding. We have cut as much as we possibly could. I don't have those exact numbers with me for you.
That's okay, but regarding the additional staff member, I think you mentioned is it grant funding as well for that staff member?
Yeah, and we haven't gotten all the grant funding, but we've applied for every grant funding possible. Some through, I believe, the Royal Bank. Maybe Ted could speak to that, but we're applying for everything we possibly can.
Okay, so running a skeleton crew just to get through this time.
Yeah, it's bare bones, and you know, the thing is, we've been doing this since 1988. We've never asked the city to pay for any of this. But we're worried. This has been a big hit to everybody. There's no doubt about it. And so we're concerned about our organization this year. There are some other monies there I think that the treasurer could probably speak to. Part of that money, if people don't pay their levy, it gets tacked on next year. And so there wouldn't be any collection of that this year. Those are costs that the city incurs that are part of that 219,000. So I think that number would probably be less on that regard as well.
Also for the year includes non-paid as well then? So are we going to still, I guess, question for city treasurer. So this 219 includes that. So we're not really putting the past due amounts away. This is going to be for this year, obviously. Are we still going to try to recover those funds from previous years?
Counselor Hagan, yes, so that total includes the collection of bad debt and also an allowance for anticipated uncollectibles. The concern is next year, assuming, obviously there's lots of assumptions and unknowns, but potentially there could be further businesses that decide to move from the downtown or, go out of business because of COVID and the impact on them. And so the potential for next year in terms of uncollectibles is probably even greater. And so this is about addressing 2020, but and the 219 includes that. But if we don't address that in this year, it will just further compound the issue next year.
What is the amount that's added on that's of bad debt then?
The budget for the BRZ is the 198,300, and then the difference is the estimate for uncollectibles, the bad debt, as well as administrative. So
The amount is estimated of what we're not going to recover as well as included in that. So anybody who has not paid previously is going to get cleared out with this amount.
so that would be any businesses that the collection was wrote off because they discontinued as a business or left the downtown and did not pay.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Hagee. Appreciate your response.
Thank you.
Councillor Morrow?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll ask my question, either the city treasurer or Mr. Heggie, you can answer. Okay, so in any given year, this BRZ levy is collected by the amount of businesses that are in the boundaries of the BRZ, correct? And somehow you guys, through your budget, come up with this dollar amount, and right now the dollar amount is $219,600. So, if I understand correctly, every business, the 550 plus, if I take the 219.6 divided by 550, and I don't know what that number is, we're talking about $400 per business average. But if I remember correctly, unless it's changed, each business pays based on the amount of square footage that it uses. Is that correct? So if I have 10,000 square feet and you have 1,000, I would pay 10 times more.
I believe it's based on your tax assessment for that property.
Tax assessment for
But
the
it is the business that pays it, not the property owner. So this is actually businesses that are paying it. It's an addition to the property tax that is being paid. Does that make sense?
Yeah, understood. Okay, so here's where I'm struggling, because, look, I would support you, but and help me out here, what I'm sensing that I'm doing on behalf of the taxpayers is supporting you and all the little local mom and pop operations that have been here and are trying to keep downtown thriving. But in the meantime, I'm supporting the Royal Bank, CIBC, Scotiabank, Bank of Montreal, and all the big corporations that have national chains. Is that not what we are doing right now by doing this?
Councillor Morrow, I really respect what you're saying, and I totally understand where you're coming from. The thing is, I'm standing here today as the chair of the BRZ, not as representing my business. I am representing all of those businesses, including the banks, including the big hotels, including all of them. They will have an economic impact to this, just like the small guy will. And so, that's the decisions you guys have to make as council. But I can't say, well, I'm here to fight for the one individual place or half the businesses. All of these businesses make up that 550. We're a team effort. This isn't a one person thing.
So in your discussion at your BRZ meeting, did you at all have a discussion, and could it be possible where, and I totally understand your point, you're not here representing the local mom and pop businesses like you and everybody else that's in the downtown. You're representing the entire, but if I'm part of the business and I'm the bank, sorry, I'm not struggling like maybe Java the Hutt is, or you, or the drugstore down the street from you, or anything, you know what I mean? So have you guys, during your meetings, have you discussed a way that we can help you on behalf of the taxpayers, help you, but not the national chains. I'm still, that's hard for me to swallow.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're at, but I would think that would be a very difficult thing to do, because even some of those chains, like we take PharmaSave next door to me, well, that's a national operation, but it's owned by a person in town here. Like, they're privately, individually owned. So where do you draw that line? You know, like, we've looked at our budget. The thing is, we've had a few bad years downtown. We were just starting to come back. We got kicked by our drug crisis here in our city. And we got kicked in a big, heavy way compared with the rest of this. Our whole city's been hit, but the downtown disproportionately. And now, just when we're starting to get out of this hole, here we are, we're kicked again. And so this is, you know, I'm standing here saying all of these businesses need this help. It's not a huge amount, but we're worried about jeopardizing our entire association, who for 32 years has paid the levy, no problem, and happy to do it.
Thank you.
We believe we have the support of our association, and I just can't split that into different groups, Councillor, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Croson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if Mr. Hagee can answer this or if one of our staff can, but can anyone tell me approximately how many people are employed in the downtown through various businesses, et cetera? What's the employment number downtown?
Like, our ballpark number would be 5,000. I think it's actually higher, because we used to have 500 members with 5,000 employees, and now there's 550, give or take. So I would assume that number is even higher.
Well, we're talking about 500 businesses and 5,000 employees that would be under this banner.
Correct, or more.
Right. Thank you very much.
Councillor Parker.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for answering the question as well, Mr. Hagee. My question is to the mover, Mr. Campbell. Councillor Campbell, you sit on the board or the committee of the downtown heart of our city. Are they in full support of transferring the funds that would go to them to this?
Yes, absolutely. That's in your package, the Heart of the City.
I just want to make sure on the record, so the people
unanimously approved as of the committee. Yes.
Perfect. And my second question, just so everyone knows, and I know it's been asked, this is not extra funds coming out of the tax base. This is just rather a shift of tax funds from one committee to another organization. Am I correct in that, Ms. Madam City Manager?
That is correct.
Thank you very much.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Morrow.
Thanks again, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Hagee, you again. I'm reading your letter that you've got here with our package. And in the third last paragraph, it says, the most concerning issue facing the BRZ is that any unpaid BRZ tax levy amounts in 2020 would then be added to the 2021 levy. Why don't you just do that? Why don't you just do that? Carry the cost over.
Carry it over and add it on?
Well, why not? That's what everybody else is going to have to do. What about all the other businesses that are outside of the BRZ? How you know, have you guys thought of that and just
No,
carry it on?
I didn't think.
I mean,
of
you
that.
might
We
have a
didn't think of
thriving,
that.
you might have a phenomenal year next year where you might even want to pay us more.
I hope we do. I hope we do. I think, you know, that's a possibility to do that, or maybe split it out over 10 years or 5 years or something like that. But to just double it up would just be another punch next year. When we don't know where we're going to be at 6 months from now, and you guys don't know from the city point of view. You'll have to make that determination yourself.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any further questions from council? Okay, we'll move on to debate. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Hagee, for coming in, and also Mr. Stilson. Hunter Hagee, of course, who was the chair of the BRZ, reminded me of a quote from former world heavyweight boxer Mike Tyson, who said, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth." So the downtown BRZ has always had a plan for the revitalization of downtown Lethbridge since its formation in 1988. And over the years, great partnerships have been established. Millions of dollars, both private and public, have been invested in a variety of ways, and a number of successful programs have been launched. like the Clean Sweep Program, Main Street Program, Business Improvement Loan Program, and the Downtown Farmers Market, to name a few. None of this would have been possible without the downtown BRZ tax levy. Well, downtown has been punched in the mouth. The 2020 plan has to be dropped, and we have to pivot. You only have to walk downtown to see the sea of stores that are currently closed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Businesses in the downtown are facing yet another financial pressure. The heart of the city and the downtown BRZ have a tremendous working relationship, and thanks to the Downtown Redevelopment Fund, we have the ability as council to counsel this 2020 tax levy and have it covered by that fund. So let's be clear, this is not the cancellation of non-residential property tax. The heart of the committee is committed to working with the BRZ in undergoing a governance and budget review to make sure that this is a one-time request. That's important. The downtown BRZ will be crucial in economic recovery, and there are several projects, as you may know, that are in various stages of completion, not to mention the rebranding of the downtown, which is the heart of the city, is partnering on and launching this summer. It is important that we support the current strategies of creating a vibrant downtown as we move forward from this unprecedented uppercut to the collective face. And I ask you to support this resolution.
Okay, we'll take that as your opening.
Yes.
Councillor Parker?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and I really do like this resolution. For the main reason is you're taking an organization or a committee that really is, their basis and their model is about the downtown. And if they're saying, you know what, the money that we get on an annual basis is better served to put it to the BRZ and to help them at this time. Because if they're not successful, this committee is really irrelevant. This committee becomes irrelevant if the business can't thrive. And I really feel bad for a lot of these mom and pop operations because there's some department stores, and I appreciate, and I shop at these department stores and all that really do have an economic advantage over these mom and pop operations, not being able to be open. You know, we all know that you can go to some of these places and get things outside of essential services. And so that's just almost insult to injury to a lot of these businesses that can't open at this time. And this is not an increase, but rather a shift of revenue. And I think it's a responsible shift, and I think something the whole community would probably support and understand. So I will be supporting it for that reason.
Thank you. Councillor Croson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the reasons we have Heart of Our City is we have a group of people who are there to give advice to council. They are people who are actively involved in the downtown, support the downtown, and understand the downtown, and they have come forward to us with a recommendation to transfer the money to support the downtown BRZ. And I'm in full support of what they are suggesting. I do see the issues. I don't want to set a precedent. I don't want to support some businesses, versus the others. But downtown is absolutely vital. As we heard, this is over 5,000 employees. This is 500 businesses that we're supporting. And it's also a psychological support that they know that their city is behind them on this. So I will be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Miyashiro?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I think we need to understand here really clearly that this is an extra levy that the downtown businesses are assessed every year, as my colleagues have noted, and it doesn't sound like all of council is aware of this fact. This isn't something special. This is something that the BRZ is asking in order to be sustainable. We have the funds to make up for this levy, and we just need to help them out and move ahead. So let's get on with it.
Thank you. Councillor Higgin?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman, and thank you for the presentation. Just furthermore to what Councillor Campbell had mentioned, I want to make sure that the understanding is there that it's not to drop non-residential tax. They will pay the same way that any other business is throughout the community. And so that is just an additional levy for downtown. And I can see where this is going, that it's going to be, well, we've dropped the taxes from downtown. So it's important that we know that that's just the additional levy for the downtown area business revitalization zone. So with that, I fully support these shops. And again, as Councillor Parker had mentioned, there's many people that are still out shopping and being able to get the goods that they can get downtown when downtown businesses are closed, and yet they can pick them up at some of these big box stores. So we need all the support we can for these businesses to help them through this time. So with that, I'll be supporting this.
Councillor Morrow.
Thank you. So we're talking about $219,000. And first of all, Mr. Heggie and Mr. Stilson, you know I respect you both, and you know that I'm downtown a lot. But I can't swallow this, and I'll tell you why. And based on my questions and the reply that I got, so we have the Downtown BRZ that collects this levy from the businesses. Whether there's 500 or 550, through your budget process, through your meetings, you decide how much money you need, and the downtown businesses pay their portion of this levy. And you guys use that to do whatever you need to do downtown to get people like me and everybody else to come and enjoy the downtown and make downtown vibrant. I understand that. But there are other businesses outside of the downtown that don't do that and also have their doors closed. So now what I'm being asked, first of all, it's not only you guys that are coming here, it's everybody. It's every Tom, Dick, and Harry that is coming to the city and expects us to be the bank for whatever. And it seems like it's pretty easy, and I'm not denying that it's not an issue, but COVID now seems to be an excuse for everybody to come to the city that I think I might have to put a resolution where instead of it being called City Hall, we call it Bank of City Hall. Because at the end of the day, wherever the money comes from, it comes from my pocket, the taxpayer's pocket. So now we have the Heart of the City, which, as you both know, I question Heart of the City and BRZ. I've always questioned the two. I believe it should be just you guys and no Heart of the City. I've said that. Hunter, you know that I've said that forever, and so do you, Ted. So now what I'm being asked to do is, on behalf of the taxpayer, I'm going to take money that we as council dedicate as tax dollars, because that's where we get it from, to Heart of the City, and now you want me to take that $219,000 from taxpayers and give it to the businesses downtown, which I would definitely give it to you. But I have a problem. Olive Park Place Mall pretty much is a national chain. All the big banks, all the law firms, the accounting firm, all of them, my tax dollar is going to help them because they're struggling through COVID to give them, worst case scenario, $400 on average. Like, I'm struggling with this. I understand the downtown needs everything. And I understand, as Councillor Campbell said it, that, you know, they got an uppercut or whatever it is that he said about Mike Tyson. Well, you know what? So has every other taxpayer in the city of Lethbridge. Most of them aren't working. So now you're asking me to take tax dollars to support big corporations, banks. I can't do that. It's just, I want to, because I want to support you guys. But the way this is right now put in front of me, I can't do it. If there was some other options, which you've identified or we talked about, you know, putting it off to next year or putting it off over 5 years, but that's not what's in front of me. What's in front of me is take the 219 from Heart of the City and give it to the Downtown BRZ as part of their levy, which comes from the taxpayers. So I can't support it.
Thank you, Councillor Morrow. Deputy Mayor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you to the mover for this resolution as well. The wonderful thing, if there is only one silver lining of COVID-19, is that it's causing us to not only do things differently, but to look at the systems and structures that are supporting every aspect of our society. And this is no different. This request is coming forward, is challenging us to look at the structure, look at the system that we have in front of us. And I completely share the absolute passion and frustration of the previous speaker when it comes to equating a place like Coco's or Bread, Milk and Honey or Drunken Sailor with Royal Bank of Canada, with a big chain store, because they're not equal. But the system has them set up as being equal. And as such, for me to deny it because I don't like the fact that a number of them, as Councillor Morrow has identified over the years, there are businesses in the city that just pay it because their head office is elsewhere in the country and they don't realize what it is. Some of them think it's a business tax, and $120 of business tax a year is actually cheap relative to other municipalities. But it's a structure and a system that's set up that does actually look at everybody equitably, and to punish the people that could actually use the support, because I don't like the fact of reallocating resources to support big chains or certainly banks is a frustration that I share, but I'm not prepared to actually step out and penalize those that are going to need the support. We have the funds in place. It's not an additional pressure on taxation. And what's nice when we're looking at these systems and structures is we're starting to have this fundamental conversation about what is government about, and I don't want to get into the manifest function of municipal government. But this is the time when we do need to be stepping in and stepping up. If we're not going to put increased burden on our residents, but we're going to be able to support those that are going to require the support, I think it's fundamental upon us to step in and to reallocate the funds. What I like about this conversation, as well as I'm looking at the downtown BRZ and I'm looking at Heart of the City and wondering if it's maybe time to have a greater fundamental conversation after this about the purpose of the two. Should they just be one? Could they be provided by the BRZ? Not on the resolution, but I think something we need to start looking about. We need to start addressing these systems so that when we reemerge from this from the other side, and we will, we can start to do things with a greater efficiency. So I will support the resolution as stated, sharing absolutely the frustrations of the previous speaker on the inequity of it, but it's what we've got and it's how I think we need to progress. I will support the resolution.
Thank you. I too will support the resolution. I listened to Mr. Heggie and understand what's happening in the downtown. Of course, the people who we want to help the most are the small business owners. We need to make sure that we have a program that goes out and helps them in every way. And there are some others who benefit from it. That's just a collateral damage. But on the whole, we have to have one program that helps all, and it's very difficult to select out some who might be hurting more than others. So we have to use a principled approach. Therefore, we have found an alternative funding source, and I do thank the Heart of the City Committee for volunteering that funding and making it available to the downtown BRZ. And I think that's a very workable solution. In this case, it's great to see different organizations in our city working together. So with that, I will support the resolution, and I will now ask Councillor Campbell to close.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks for everyone's comments. If I can use, it might be a weak analogy here, but you know, you're on the Edmonton Oilers, you're paying McDavid $9 million. You're paying a fourth line defenseman who just came up from the minors $900,000. You're all on the same team. Yeah, you got to pay the big guys the big money. And so, but you're all in it together and you're all going for the main idea to get the Stanley Cup. And in this case, you're all getting it all in together. People are paying different amounts, but you're all trying to create a vibrant downtown. And that goes hand in hand with each other. So maybe a weak analogy, but that's kind of the way I look at it. We, you know, Park Place pays an enormous amount of money for this levy, whereas, you know, Jabba the Hutt does not pay the same amount. But they're in it together. It's a team, and that's what the BRZ and the Heart of the City is all about: workmanship, getting together, knowing what the common goal is together. And I think this is an opportunity for us to take that money, transfer it. It's not a tax break, but it is a transfer, not a tax break in the property of the downtown. It is a reshifting to help them into this, what is an incredibly unprecedented time. With that, I will ask for the vote.
Okay, question has been called. All in favor? Any opposed? Anyone online opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. We'll now move on to 4.1.1, Bylaw 6221, a resolution from Councillor Miyashiro. A bylaw to provide for a pre-authorized tax installment prepayment plan. For second reading, be it resolved that Bylaw 6221, a bylaw to provide for a pre-authorized tax installment prepayment plan, be given second reading. Councillor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. So this bylaw proposes the rate of discount on prepayments at 0.75% for the 2021 tax year, which is a decrease from 1.25% for 2020 for the tip prepayments. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Government of Canada has lowered the overnight rate by 1.5% in the last month, down to 0.25%, which in turn will lower both the short-term rates that individual taxpayers will earn in their term deposits. The reason the city is offering a rate that is higher than the ratepayers would receive on the 120 to 179 day deposits is to provide a bit of incentive for people to remain on tip, given the economic environment caused by the pandemic. Pursuant to Sections 339, 340, 346, and 347 of the Municipal Government Act, Council may pass a bylaw permitting those ratepayers who wish the opportunity to pay the 2021 taxes by monthly installments commencing August 1st, with the final installment due May 1st, 2021. If necessary, an additional withdrawal to balance the account when next year's tax levy is finalized in May will be made on the last business day of June. So for that, I present the second reading of this bylaw.
Okay, any questions from council? Okay, I see no questions. We'll move on to debate. Councillor Miyashiro?
I'll close.
Okay, Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to add my support to this bylaw and also try and give a strong message to the community that everyone that can find a way to get onto TIP should explore it. It's an excellent option for folks. They do get a discount through paying over the TIP, and right now it's an even better discount. So I would just really like to tell the community to explore TIP, especially in times like these when tax bills are coming due. It would have been nice to pay it, as we do, in installments all year round. Thank you.
Any further debate? I'll ask Councillor Miyashiro to close.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. As Councillor Carlson just said, TIP is a great way for homeowners to avoid having to pay a big tax amount at closing. So I hope that council sees fit to pass this bylaw as presented.
Okay, question has been called. All in favor? Are there any opposed? That is unanimous. We'll move on to third reading. Be it resolved that bylaw 6221, a bylaw to provide for a pre-authorized tax installment prepayment plan, be given third reading, and the mayor and the city clerk be authorized to sign and seal the same. Councillor Miyashiro?
Call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, I hear none. Thank you. We'll move on to 4.1.2, bylaw 6222, 2020 property tax and supplementary property tax bylaw. Councillor Miyashiro proposing, be resolved that bylaw 6222, 2020 property tax and supplementary property tax bylaw be given second reading. Councillor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Bylaw 6222 sets a tax rate to be imposed upon property within the city of Lethbridge to raise the estimates of municipal revenues from property taxes outlined in the operating budget in accordance with Section 243 of the Municipal Government Act. The bylaw also acknowledges tax rates required to raise a requisition for the Alberta School Foundation Fund, the Holy Spirit Roman Catholic Separate Regional Division Number 4, and Green Acres Foundation. There's an additional requisition required for preparation costs of designated industrial property, applicable only to those properties within that designation. Similar to last year, we must include 5 farm properties that, by judicial order, are to be taxed at the county mill rates. County mill rates will not be confirmed until May 7th, which was last week, and if required, this bylaw will be amended to reflect any variance to the anticipated county rates. This bylaw also authorizes the levying of supplementary taxes.
Okay, before we deal with that, there are 2 proposed amendments. The first one we will deal with is amendment to bylaw 6222, 2020 property tax and supplementary tax bylaw 4.1.2.1a from Councillor Crowson. Whereas a judicial order is in place that mandates the collection of taxes for 5 farm properties at Lethbridge County mill rates, and whereas the 2020 county mill rates were not available until Thursday, May the 7th, 2020, therefore be it resolved that prior to second and third reading of bylaw 6222, 2020 property tax and supplementary tax bylaw, the following amendments be approved. The third clause in the bylaw be amended to replace the amount of $158,656,794 to $158,656,943, and that the schedule on page 4, section 3, be replaced as follows from municipal, annex residential, $4,199, tax rate 0046903. Annex farmland, $2,963, tax rate 0.0248625. Subtotal municipal portion, $158,656,794. Total tax amount, $197,671,386. 2. Annex residential, $4,339, tax rate 0.0048461. Annex farmland, $2,972, tax rate 0.0249373. Subtotal municipal portion, $158,656,943. Total tax amount, $197,671,535. Councillor Crowson.
Thank you, Worship, for reading all of that. As we noted, and as Councillor Mayor Shiro noted, we were waiting to get the county's rates for the bylaw, so this is what the amendment is, and we have the county rates. We did our best understanding for the first reading. Now we have better information, and this information is included in the amendment. I'll open it up first if there's any questions.
Are there any questions? I see none.
As my colleagues understood that we put the meeting on this day because we had to wait for the county's information, I'm sure they understand why the change has been made, so I will call the vote.
Okay, debate has opened. Is there any debate? I see none. Question has been called. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries unanimously. And the second amendment. Yep, I'll ask Deputy Mayor Kaufman to read it.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I have a resolution from Mayor Spearman, an amendment to bylaw 6222, 2020 property tax and supplementary property tax bylaw. Whereas the coronavirus COVID-19 outbreak is having a significant impact on the city and its citizens, and whereas the City of Lethbridge taxpayers are facing financial hardship as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak, and whereas City Council approved the 2019 to 2022 City of Lethbridge operating budget with a 1.82% increase in 2020 for the municipal portion of the annual property tax, therefore be it resolved that the city manager be directed to amend the 2020 operating budget on a one-time basis by eliminating the scheduled 1.82% municipal tax increase, thereby reducing the tax increase to 0%. Before you open, Mayor Spearman, are you okay if we go to questions on the resolution?
Sure.
Are there any questions from members of council, Madam Clerk?
I have Councillor Carlson.
Councillor Carlson, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Worship, for the resolution. Through you, Deputy Mayor, perhaps to either the mover or city manager. How much would this remove out of our planned budget going forward if this was passed?
City manager.
I'm going to ask the treasurer to respond to that. Yeah, okay, sorry.
Deputy Mayor Kaufman through to Councillor Carlson. It's approximately $2.8 million.
Thank you. And I know that as a corporation, the city is all sorts of uncertainty right now. We're incurring extra expenses, but we also may be incurring some savings. If this amendment passes, I guess city manager or the mover or the city treasurer, where are we going to make up this shortfall? Or where are we going to find to cut?
Councillor Carlson, we would have to kind of go away and bring back some recommendations in terms of where the budget would be adjusted, but it would be likely a combination of various things depending on kind of which departments are impacted and which potentially has some savings available. So just based on the recommendation, the city manager is directed to amend the budget, and we would just need to come back with the details of what that might look like.
Okay. But it will mean if you've got a $2.8 million hole in your budget, something's going to have to give, I'm assuming.
That's correct. It would be some sort of combination of, looking at our reserves, like our prior year's surplus, or department surpluses. They would look at adjusting potentially wages and looking at other areas that are seeing some relief as a result of facilities closed or different aspects like that. We haven't exactly nailed down where all those amendments would take place, but it's we would just have to look at that all as a whole.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Councillor Hagan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Two questions. Just furthermore to what Councillor Carlson had mentioned, that we're obviously going to have to find funding from somewhere, and you've given some different ideas there, Ms. Pinkston, as far as where they could be, not where they are, but we could find savings in throughout other budgets in the city. Now, I'm just curious to know, and maybe this is a question for the mover, that obviously with some of these, not just finding throughout, but it's also our spending that we're doing on our operating budget. Is that something that we're going to, and I don't know who could answer this, and maybe the mover, is that something we're going to open this back up and have a look at how our spending is right now then, as far as not just finding elsewhere, but maybe reducing some of the spending that's going out?
Mayor Spearman.
I think anything is open. What we're looking at is less than a 2% reduction in operating expenses. So I think we would look to the city manager to identify areas that could be deferred or reduced in spending, and I think those recommendations would come back to council, and we would evaluate which ones would have the least impact on our citizens and quality of life. And so I think it's just a matter of whether we continue spending as normal, or if we take a second look at it and try to find efficiencies.
Thank you.
Sorry, I can probably add on to that if you don't mind. I think that we will look at the whole picture. I mean, as Ms. Pinkston said, we are currently experiencing some reduction in spending just based on some of the facility closures. As council is aware, we have laid off staff, so we're not paying some of those wages. So there are areas that we currently have that would take into account the whole picture of what a reduction would look like. I think anything over and above that would, and depending on an ongoing basis, this is a one-time basis, and so I think we can accommodate that within what's happening right now.
Okay.
Councillor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. To the city manager or the city treasurer, what does this 1.82% increase mean per average household?
City treasurer.
Councillor Miyashiro, 1.82% tax increase on a single-family residential assessment of $268,000 property value would be approximately $42 for the year.
For the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. Just in terms, just so I'm clear, the taxes are zero this year, then having already approved next year's budget, what happens to that 1 point or that 1.8 increase? Do we, just process-wise, what happens?
Yeah, Councillor Campbell, assuming that we do zero this year, that would then result in a 3.64% tax increase in 2021, assuming everything remains the same as what was approved in the operating budget.
And so if I'm assuming the average person this year pays $42 an increase in this year, then next year will be double that. So an $84 per person increase.
That's right, approximately, yep.
And I guess we're still talking about operational reviews to the city manager. Do you have any confidence that we can find efficiencies in some other areas that are still ongoing?
I believe there are some cost savings. Again, I think as reported to council, probably in camera, that, in order to achieve some of those savings, we are having to, in some cases, spend money to ensure that we can implement those changes. So I can't say for certain that there's an amount of money that's going to be available this year in 2020 with all confidence. But again, we are looking at all of the areas that were under the operational review. In addition, we are looking at all operations. So just so council is clear that we're not just focusing on what was considered in the operational review, we're looking all through the organization for cost savings at this point in time.
And just one more question, if I may. Just if this goes through, and then is there a chance that we can just say, all right, let's stop. We're going to redo this entire this budget for 2021. Is that a possibility, or is that going to go through another process?
I believe there is a notice of motion that is to be discussed through council. I believe at your next council meeting, I think it's proposed to discuss a review of operational budget and some by November of 2020. So I think, but again, that needs approval of council to go ahead with that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Madam Treasurer, if I can just clarify on the previous question, you responded that 3.64% would be assumed as the carryover in tax, but that assumes that there's no reduction in spending, correct?
Councillor Kaufman, based on this resolution, it's a one-time reduction, and so I think I ended that statement with assuming everything else remains as it was approved in the operating budget.
Thank you. And just for clarification as well, because there's a difference between mill rate and assessment and taxation, and people don't always necessarily understand how the relationship goes. If we're looking at a 0% tax increase, that doesn't necessarily mean that your taxes won't go up, correct? If your assessment goes up, your taxes will also increase, correct?
That's correct. Thank you for clarifying that, Councillor Kaufman. This is assuming your assessment value was unchanged from the prior year, and some may change. So it's, yes, that's
Thank
correct.
You. Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So we're talking the four-year cycle, four-year budget. I don't even remember. When did we, what's the 4 year that we're talking about? From when to when?
Councillor Morrow, the current four-year budget is 19 to 2022.
So in 19, we increased it 1.82. In 20, 1.82. Is it 1.82 every year?
Correct, yes.
So for the 4 years, we're increasing taxes 1.82 every year for 4 years. If this amendment passes, then we would be taking the 1.82 and adding it on to next year, so everybody would be paying 3.64 tax increase.
That's correct.
Okay. So you've said something, or city manager, that we are obviously looking, and we could be finding this 2.8 million or whatever, any amount of it, because we're not spending it. We're saving money in certain areas. So if that's the case, why do we have to add it to the next year? Why can't we just say 0 period and keep next year at 1.82?
I believe the unknown is that we have an approved budget now. So any variances within that budget get reviewed and come forward to council. But the plan, so if you think about what's the big picture plan, it is the 4-year budget. And so without any other direction, again, there's variances that go through the business units all the time. This year will be different. We will have some business units that will have over expenditures due to COVID and maybe some other reasons, and we will have some surpluses as well. So I think we're anticipating that we can take a look and have a strategy put in place, our treasurer have a strategy to look at what's the one time we can accommodate if this was to go through, but again, only on a one-time basis. Something that's on an ongoing basis would have larger impacts on our operating budget and would have to be reviewed and likely completely redone.
Thank you. To the mover, Mr. Mayor. So we're talking, on average, based on an average assessed property, $42. It concerns me when somebody has to pay us now, and we're going to say, no, don't pay us now, pay us next year. How do you see this as a benefit? Because I understand what you're trying to do, but I don't quite see how this is a benefit to any taxpayer when they still have to pay it. So rather than paying 1.82 now, you're going to pay me 3.62 next year. How is this a benefit?
Well, I would say we're going to review the budget next year. The administrative reviews are underway. I think when we originally approved the administrative reviews and that whole process, it was not our intention to incur expenses and then have no benefits. The purpose of those administrative reviews, we hadn't done an external administrative review in 40 years in this city, and I think the idea was to identify potential savings. So there was some benchmarking established through those administrative reviews that indicated in a number of areas we're spending more per capita than other municipalities. And the benefit of doing this would be to hold the line, because we were identified as the second highest municipality in Alberta with respect to municipal taxes. So hold the line, recognizing that this is the year when many taxpayers and many businesses are suffering. And this would be a year to basically hold that line, and then as the administrative review reports come in and identify opportunities for savings, to direct those savings to the relief of taxation going forward. And therefore, if we do this year, it's sending a message that taxes are not going up as usual. And then we look for maintaining limited tax increases in future years.
So then, and I understand that, but why couldn't we then just say 0 for this year and keep 1.82 for next year based on the fact that we are doing all these reviews? We just heard the city manager say that they're going to look at cost savings and whatever it is that they're going to find. So $2.8 million total is what we're either going to gain or not gain. The way I see it is, if we're going to really help the taxpayer, why don't we just say 0 and worry about next year, leave it at 1.82, rather than adding this on? Because I would be more supportive if we just said, let's go 0 this year and leave the other two as 1.82 and 1.82.
Well, with the review that's scheduled to take place, if that resolution passes next week, if that took place and we did the review and identified additional savings, there would be no requirement for it to go up 3.64 next year.
My point.
Yeah, so we don't have to be prescriptive. This, at the moment, it says one time, but there would subsequently be another resolution taking into account savings that were identified at a future date. At the moment, all we can deal with is what we know, and then we can deal with what we learn thereafter. So I don't think there's an automatic 3.64% increase if additional savings are identified in the future.
Okay, thank you. I will be putting in an amendment, so I'll write that.
Yeah, and I understand amendments, any councillor can put forward an amendment, but what we're trying to deal with is what we know now, not what we might know in the future. That's the challenge.
Thank you. That's the end of your questioning at the moment, Councillor Moreau. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. A question through you to the city manager or city treasurer. I know that I think one of the previous questions brought up the notice of motion from Councillor Crowson about reviewing our operating budget. I'm just curious, and I believe Calgary did this in 1 year, but if rather than just saying a zero and not know where we're going to have to cut or where we're going to have to pare back, but is there a possibility of doing a review in November when we have better figures and better understanding of where we've expended and where we can save, to do tax rebates? Is that something that's ever been done, or I think Calgary did it, but I can't remember it ever happening here. So rather than canceling the increase for this year, doing the possibility of a rebate after review, is that a possibility?
City manager.
Councillor Carlson, I guess if we wanted to look at rebates or a reduction, that would relate to 2021 property taxes. And so at that time, City Council would consider and look at the revenue required for that. So it would be an amendment to a subsequent year, not the current year. Is that what you're asking, Councillor Carlson?
I guess that is sort of answered. So any review we did, say in November, if we were to find ways to trim the current budget we're in, 2020, could not be refunded in this year. It would have to be refunded in the next tax year, or rebated.
Just from a planning perspective, it would be very difficult to review the 2020 budget that late in the year, because we would have already kind of been, there's 1 month left. If the review happens in November, there's not a lot of time to adjust our budget in the current year. It would be looking at 2021 and 2022 that would have the opportunity for an adjustment, is my understanding of what the motion was proposing. So it would be about adjusting in 2021.
Thank you for that. And second question through you, Deputy Mayor, to City Manager, is if this passes, how speedily does Council have to reconvene its Finance Committee to find the $2.8 million in savings, or how quickly can that be accomplished?
I believe the direction that's in the resolution is that you would direct the city manager to find that. And likely the city manager would report back where that, where the money came from, and just report that back to council, not necessarily for council approval.
So council wouldn't have any say in the direction of whether we just say, okay, no park watering or mowing or whatever it would be. It's simply administration, find it and tell us what you're cutting and or shutting.
As this resolution is currently written, on a one-time basis, I don't think that it would impact service levels, so not a conversation necessarily, but just a report out about how the additional funds were found, either through cost savings or through use of reserves or any kind of surpluses that some of the business units had.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Councillor Hagan.
Deputy Mayor, question for, I always want to case city solicitor, city treasurer. We talked about assessment values. It's based on assessment values, and assessment values obviously go up. It's going to change if they remain the same. Do you know for this coming year, in light of again, this COVID thing, that assessment values are probably going to be dramatically dropped. So that mean that we're going to be seeing taxation already drop down based on, obviously, I shouldn't say percentage, but the actual what you pay based on your assessed value of your home.
That's correct. It's based on the assessed value. And assessment is essentially a year delayed. So the property taxes for 2020 are based on 2019 assessment values. So we will potentially start to see some adjustments or reductions to assessment value starting in 2021, so if you take the total tax revenue required divided by that assessment, the total assessment for the whole city, if that assessment number is lower, then the individuals in the community will pay slightly more to cover off the total revenue requirement.
So all right, so assessment value goes down, but depending on what is needed, you still might the assessed, yeah, okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Higgin. Councillor Parker. Sorry, Acting Mayor Parker.
On here. Thank you. I just want to follow up. I want to make sure we're clear on how, when the mayor's resolution brings forward that we're going to be taking no increase this year, and there's this kind of assumption that's, I don't know if it's assumption or misinformation or misunderstanding that suddenly we're going to take all that money that we lost and it's going to be doubled up the next year. If I look at it this way, so 2019, we had a 1.82% increase. 2020, that being this year, is a 1.82% increase. The mayor's resolution is 0%, and then the next year would be another 1.82% increase, right? So it's not like we're making up on lost revenue by taxing people more next year. That next year tax increase was already calculated in there. Am I correct when I say my inference on that?
Yes, that's correct. Do you want to comment on that?
So based on the approved budget, for 2019 to 2022, we had scheduled, it required a 1.82% tax increase each year of those 4 years. If we do 0 in the current year, then we still require that funding that was budgeted for 2020 in future years.
So another way, so for example, I appreciate, so here I'll use numbers instead of the percentages here, okay? So let's say in 2019, we needed $2.8 million extra dollars. Then in 2020, we needed $2.8 million. And then in this year, if the mayor's resolution passes, there'll be no $2.8 million. And then next year, there'll be another $2.8 million. It won't be $5.6 million added on there. Am I correct? Do you know if you know what I'm looking at? Like,
Councillor Parker, so it would be $5.6 million that we would require in 2021 based on the approved budget in order to make up the shortfall of doing 0 this year. Because it's on a one-time basis and it's not ongoing, that would, in order to do that on an ongoing basis, we would have to cut service levels to have a 0 and maintain a 0 ongoing.
But there still was a $2.8 million savings in the year previous, right? That's if the mayor's resolution was passed.
We would have to reduce the budget by $2.8 million to balance the budget.
To balance the budget. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to muddy the waters there, but just.
Is that your questions,
Yes,
Acting Mayor Parker?
thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Morrow. Thank
you, Deputy Mayor. Actually, before I ask a few other questions, I might ask one of you, if you don't mind. This is an interesting discussion. If we had a 1-year or 2-year budget, how would this be a little bit different? We might not be sitting here having this discussion, and I know you've been pushing for that. Just curious, because I'm trying to think if I want to support you when you bring a resolution for a 2-year budget.
We can have the debate and conversation at that time.
Order, that's.
Thank you very much. Do you have a question or an amendment put forward?
So my question to either the mover or the city treasurer, whoever, when I read the resolution, the mayor's amendment, it doesn't say anything in there that we take the 1.82 and add it to next year. Doesn't say that in the resolution. So therefore, I like it because I don't have to add my amendment. Does that mean that if we approve this amendment, all we're doing is leaving the next 2 years at 1.82 and we're turning this one to 0?
So we are here today to look at the tax bylaw for this year. City Council next year will also have an opportunity to to pass a bylaw. And at that point in time, I think there would be likely another conversation that's probably better informed because we'll be in a better position to understand our position. So as much as this doesn't do anything going forward, just remind council that this is just for this year. This tax discussion is for this year.
Okay,
and you will have the opportunity to look at it again in another year.
I just want to make sure that if I support this, the message that's going to get out to the community is that our 2020 1.82 tax increase will become 0. And next year, as of today, as of this vote, if we vote on this, next year is still 1.82 and the year after is still 1.82.
So next year will be more than 1.82 unless you change the budget. We are working off of an approved budget. Council has approved the budget. And so if you recall, one of the reasons we have 1.82 every year is to balance out, so we'd get rid of the spikes and the.
But we've approved 1.82 every year for 4 years.
That is correct.
And now this resolution, as is, says eliminate the scheduled 1.82 municipal tax increase, thereby reducing the tax increase to 0. It does not say, and take the 1.82 and add it to the next year.
Because this is only for this year. This is a 0 for this year only. So you'd have to make, when you go to pass a bylaw going forward, this time next year, you will have to look at what, again, you're going to potentially relook at the budget, you're opening that up, looking at what services you're going to cut, and at that point in time, you'll have better information about what the tax increase is going to be. I think with this 0, what you're saying is only on a one-time basis. That's not, there's a difference obviously between one-time and ongoing. One-time means that we can potentially find the funds. I'm pretty confident, our treasurer has told me, that we're able to find $2.8 million on a one-time basis only. But we can't do that ongoing, likely, into future years without reducing the budget and having a different approved budget from City Council, which will likely mean service cuts.
But if you're going to have service cuts this year, and you're going to find the 2.8 million solely on service cuts, let's assume that for a minute. Let's just assume that you and your staff are going to find this 2.8 million. Well, you kind of have to if we approve this.
If you approve this, we will find $2.8 million.
So now next year, that same 2.8 million, it's not there. We found a way of saving 2.8 million. Why are we adding 1.82 to the existing one? I'm struggling with that.
Because that is the approved budget that we have, and we're just giving you information based on the approved budget.
Okay, let me ask the question differently.
Okay, maybe I'm answering it wrong.
So, if I put my hand up and support this, I am also supporting, even though it's not in here, I'm also supporting that next year the budget will be 1.82 times 2.
Unless we receive additional direction from council about a different budget, we would have that. Again, we're just trying to lay out the scenario based on what we know today, and that is we have a 4-year plan, and this is the 4-year plan we're working from. So any of the options that Ms. Pinkson has put forward has put that in the context of an approved plan, which is the budget. Should that change, that would likely change the outcome next year in terms of what you're looking at for an increase.
Deputy Mayor, when would I put in my amendment, verbal amendment?
You want to, if you have an amendment to this, if you can hang on because there are 2 questioners still, and then I'll come back to you. Is that okay? Just not to muddy the waters too terribly much. Councillor Carlson, if you've dealt with your dog.
Yes. Sorry, the one time that I take it off mute, the mailman showed up. So I apologize to my colleagues for that. Question through you to City Manager, City Treasurer, Deputy Mayor. In our budget planning, we approved several 2-year funding with the request that groups come back to us and present the efficacy or the success or failure of that 2-year program, and then it would be possibly added to the next 2-year budget. Do we know if all those requests came back and they were all going swimmingly and necessarily, do we have any indication or any idea of what extra pressure that would put on the budget? Because most of those were funded from one-time sources. They weren't built into the budget, if I recall. And so I'm wondering if we have any idea what the excess pressure may be on next year's budget from those requests.
Manager?
Ms. Pinkston's just looking that up now.
Okay, and so while Ms. Pinkston's looking that up, I'll just ask, because there seems to be some misunderstanding of how the budget works and flows and is impacted. If Council approves this amendment right now, we remove $2.8 million from the revenue side of the budget that has to be found, whether it's through service cuts or it's dipping into reserves. However, that is still in the budget. It's just found in other places. So that's what would initiate the 1.64 next year. Am I correct with that?
3.64. Yeah. Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to clarify when you talk about some of the service levels that we're discussing this year are one-time reductions. So related to COVID, when I talk about some of the service levels that we're reducing, those are one time. So as we get into 2021 and get things back to somewhat of a new normal, and without further direction on service cuts, we would be not having those as ongoing savings. I just wanted to make sure we were clear on that.
Right. You could find, perhaps through recreation culture services that aren't open right now, some services that cannot be offered, you could probably find those savings this one-time year. But unless we then say next year we keep all those things closed and we keep not providing those services, those dollars have to be found. That's why the 3.6 is being
yes.
considered.
Yes, that's correct. And again, we'll have better information as we again come out of the other side of this, I think is our treasurer's words. We will have better information at that point in time as to whether or not that's a cost savings, again, one time or not.
Okay, thank you. I hope that helps my colleagues understand the reason for the 3.6.
So I think Ms. Pinkston has an answer to your first question.
Councillor Carlson, I'm not sure I can give you an exact amount, just given the fact that during budget deliberations, I'm assuming you're talking about the fee-for-service community groups that were only given one-time funding or 1 or 2 year funding. Because a lot of those amounts were amended and not what they originally asked for, it would be difficult to kind of give you an exact number of what that might look like. But I do know that back in December, when the downtown clean and safe strategy was brought forward to provide additional funding, that was approximately $1.7 million, which was again kind of one-time funding approval. So it would be difficult to give you an exact amount just because of all of the amounts that were adjusted and amended during budget deliberations and what City Council potentially would approve to be ongoing versus one time. So I'm not sure I can give you an exact number at this point.
No, and thank you. I appreciate that. It would probably be very complex, and so it just triggered in my head as we were discussing this. But were there any, if you just recall, or if any of my colleagues recall, were there any of the big ticket items? I'm thinking something like the community police officers, the watch, those types of things that were funded only on a 2-year and they'd be looked at in year 3 and 4. Were there any of those bigger ticket items that stick out that someone might recall?
Councillor Carlson, if I may, those were included in the budget with the direction from the police commission to come back and request the additional 2 years. But given the significant amount of money related to those initiatives, they were rolled into base for the 4 years. And then council would decide if they provide that funding to the police commission or not. So those were those 3 initiatives for the watch. Just let me find them here, sorry.
And no, and that's fine, Ms. Singson. If we rolled those into the 1.82 to provide some certainty for funding, then I appreciate that answer. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, we did.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Councillor Hagan.
Sure, I'll take that off. I think I'm hoping for an amendment to this that it sounds like may be coming, so I will leave my questions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Morrow, you had an amendment?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, the amendment, Mr. Westerson. So basically what I'm trying to say is just add at the very end of this Mayor Spearman's resolution is further therefore be it resolved that something to the effect, and you can word it better than I can. I want to make sure we capture it, but further be it resolved that the remaining 2021 and 2022 tax increase remain at 1.82%. That's it. So basically what we're doing is we are going to 0% this year and 1.82 and 1.82 in the remaining 2 years, as is approved right now. So if you can capture that somehow.
Madam Clerk, can that be, do you know what, I've got it, oh, I don't have that. Mr. Westerson, would you be able just to email this amendment to Councillors Morrow or Councillors Croson, Carlson and Miyashiro? They're online, so they can see it as well.
Sorry, just before you do that, I think that would also impact the wording above, talking about on a one-time basis or on a, yeah, you'd probably have to remove that wording as well.
Point of order or point of clarification, if I can, Deputy Mayor?
Councillor Carlson, go ahead.
Does that amendment materially change the intent of the amendment? I'm not sure if that's allowed. If it does, and I might be mistaken in that.
First of all, let me just clarify, Madam Clerk, verbal amendment, do we need a seconder on that?
Yes, you do, as per the procedure bylaw.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder? Mayor Spearman? Mayor Spearman, seconded. Thank you very much. Okay. To the materiality of the original proposal, the original resolution? I don't believe that it changes anything from the original resolution. Solicitor, City Manager, do you see anything that materially changes?
Because this is forward-looking as opposed to the one-time, it appears to be material to me, yes.
One-time basis. That's if the mayor agrees.
But if that's removed, that rather than an amendment, that is actually, I believe, a different motion. I would look to the clerk or the solicitor for comment on that.
I'm just seeking clarification with regards to the way it's written right now. Isn't that the way it stands right now? It's 1.82 in the budget, so there's no amendment right now this way, because that's what it was passed at budget time.
No, this is saying that to keep it at 1.82, so you wouldn't actually, you would have to reopen the budget and look for cost savings and service level reductions, as this is indicated here. I believe the intention, at least how we interpreted what the motion was this was on a one-time basis to find $2.8 million. We believe this amendment changes this materially in terms of how we would approach this going forward.
Morrow?
Why?
Because it's not a one-time, it would be an ongoing
If you take,
cost reduction.
If you take, and again, it's not, that portion is the mayor's, but my understanding of this, if you remove the, on a one-time basis, so be directed to amend the 2020 operating budget by eliminating the scheduled 1.82 municipal tax increase, thereby reducing the tax increase to 0, and further that, the other 2 years remain at 1.82. How is this changing anything? But
We would have to-
your message is you got 0% increase this year, and 1.82 next year, and 1.82 the year after that.
So again, in the context of a 4-year plan, that's how we came to the 1.82. And so not having the 1.82 and accumulating going forward, because it's on an accumulative basis, is that just eliminating, pulling that out isn't a one-time exercise under what you're proposing. So you're suggesting that we reduce on an ongoing basis 1.82.
If that's the way you interpret it, and if that's the way, then that means that administration would have to find 2.8 million this year.
And then 5.6 next year, and then another 2.8. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. I guess my point, and that's fine, if that's the intention of council, my point is that this resolution, as you've amended, isn't an amendment to the resolution. This materially changes the intent from a one-time to an ongoing. And so that was just my point. But again, I'd ask our solicitor to comment on that, if you could, because he may have a different opinion than I do.
City Solicitor?
Just struggling with where to begin. So I think that the city manager has hit upon a valid point. It's very different to talk about when you think about one-time funding, that's essentially like spending reserve money. It's not in like the base of funding. So when you take $2.8 million out of this year's anticipated revenue, next year that becomes 2.8 times 2, because it's already assuming that the 2.8 that we would have got from this year carries over, and in the third year that. So as amended, I would read this as we have to find $2.8 million from the budget you approved for this 4-year cycle this year, 5.6 next year, and roughly, 8 million plus or minus, whatever that, I can't do the math in my head, out of the third year to meet that target, which is fine, but that's very different than one time cobbling together from all the COVID variability relief for 1 year. So I think that's the distinction. Both are valid decisions for council to contemplate, but they're quite different. Does that help clarify the?
Okay, thank you. That being the statement, question then to Councillor Morrow, would you be prepared to bring this as a resolution to a regular meeting of council, even on the 19th, with the same type of proposal, because then it becomes a separate conversation, isolated from what we're trying to do in the context of today's, but with the same intent and the same spirit. We can clarify numbers. I'm assuming the city manager could provide what that would actually look like.
I don't see the reason why, because the message is still the same. Look, the whole intent, and I'll let the mayor speak to this, the whole intent is that we're trying to save the taxpayers a little bit of money. So if we find 2.8 million, what I'm suggesting is that keep the other years at 1.82. If administration can't find that 5.6 or any number in between 2.8 and 5.6, and the final year, whatever that number is, I'm assuming it'll be between 5.6 and 8 point whatever, they would come to council and we would revisit. Aren't we going to do that sometime in November anyways? So all I'm saying is, for the time being, let's go to 0 and then 1.82, 1.82, because that's how it is.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carlson, do you have any additional questions?
I think there may be a lack of clarity or understanding. The resolution that was put forward and I may just be repeating the city solicitor and city manager, was to find one-time funding to keep the budget increase at zero this year. The amendment says that money is removed forever ongoing. And I think they are two completely different resolutions. I think the amendment changes it greatly, giving the city manager the authority to find on a one-time basis savings, hopefully, through lack of expenditures due to COVID, is one thing. The second one, I think, is I don't know what the word is. It's not an abdication, but council controls the budget. We direct where the budget is spent. If this resolution goes through, that's pointing out, as the city solicitor said, 2.8 this year that we could be able to find, and then 5.6 the following year. That where's that going to come from? That's where council has to decide. And then the following year, there's 8 point some million gone from the budget that council has not had any direction.
Thank you. Councillor Morrow had asked a question and addressed the mayor. Mayor Spearn, did you want to answer Councillor Morrow's question?
Can I just have that question restated again? Yeah.
You were asking if the mayor sees it as being any...
Yeah. I do see it differently. I believe if we're able to find the 2.8 million this year, that money will be ongoing savings. So I think there's enough information that we can continue with that. And the way I read the resolution, it says that subsequent increases would be 1.82% as planned. So all we've done is reduce the base by 2.8 million and then increase each year 1.82. I recognize also that we have ongoing expenses. So I think, Councillor Morrow, what's being explained somewhat is in some areas, the expenses will go up. For example, in negotiated collective agreements. That's outside of the budget, and those go up every year anyway. So then we would have to find money to offset increases. So what would those savings be looking like? So I understand the challenge, but I also know that we're doing operational reviews as well. So I think it's possible to say, if you'd like 1.82 increases after this one-time reduction in the base, that's a valid resolution. Does it materially change the resolution? In my mind, as the original mover, it doesn't.
We've got 3 people in line first for questions. Councillor Crowson.
Mine is actually more debate. Is that okay at this time, or are you just wanting questions?
No, we're just going to deal with questions here for the moment. I'll keep you in line for debate then. Councillor Higgin.
Thank you. I need to get this figured out because, Jody, if you go upstairs, or city manager, if you walk upstairs and you open up your safe upstairs and you find $2.8 million that we could use now, next year will be the same 1.82 and the following will be 1.82. That'll be fine if you find that money. If you find that 2.8 million this year, it will remain at 1.82 for the other 2 years, correct?
No, that is not correct.
So, members of council, for clarification, what council has done is we approved a 4-year budget in 2018. And so let's say, for the sake of simple example, the money for 2020 is $1 million. We've approved for 2021 $1,100,000. That's been approved. So to say that you just keep it at 1.8, we have approved a budget for 2021 already that's at $1.1 million, not $1 million.
But
so you still have to make. We have approved a budget already for 2021.
For 2021 of 1.82. To bring this to zero, this 1.82, it costs us 2.8 million.
We have approved a budget for 2021 already. That's the thing. That's where this money coming out this year is great and deals with it this year. But the money is in the budget in 2021. We have already approved the budget for 2021. We did that in 2018. So if we pull...
But I'm looking, just a second here, I'm looking at 1.82%. If we remove 1.82, it costs us 2.8 million. So 1.82 down to zero is 2.8 million.
And that money is already in the 2021 budget that we have already approved in 2018. So you have to look at the 2021 budget in isolation, taking out the 2.6 plus an additional 2.6 if you want to keep it at 1.82.
I'm
Clear
and
as
and
mud.
I guess here's this. Yeah, here's the second question. If this is not approved today because or is not voted on today, what if it's next Monday? Is our meeting that's too late?
That is correct. That's why we're having the special meeting today.
I understand.
If I could, sorry, if I
So
could maybe
I
just,
think
can you
to
build on?
Councillor
Thank you.
Hagan's question, if the amendment that Councillor Morrow has just put forward is defeated or postponed or anything, that's actually okay because that's not going to affect the tax notices going out for this year. It's the first part, the original resolution we're debating. It needs approval toot sweet in order to get the tax notices out. Councillor Morrow's amendment can actually be dealt with at any time between now and the fall or whenever in order to give the city manager prior to the next budget starting in 2021. Does that clarify your question?
It doesn't, but that's okay.
Sorry, I interrupted you. You did have a question for the city manager?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. In fact, you actually raised a point that I was going to talk about anyway, about the 2021 budget. So I'm not going to beat this anymore. So I won't.
Okay, thank you. Then we fall back on the, Mayor Spearman?
I have a procedural question relating to the amendment.
Go ahead.
So the practice has been that if a motion is defeated, it can't be reintroduced for 6 months. So if this amendment is defeated, would it mean that we couldn't consider this issue for 6 months?
Madam Clerk, I'm trying to recall the exact page in our procedure bylaw where we have that stated, and that's been a point of debate for some time.
Excuse me for a moment.
Go ahead,
Deputy
Councillor.
Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor Croson.
My notice of motion next week will be dealing with exactly this, not stating what the budget might come out in November, but that we would be reviewing the budget. So I think this entire conversation is moot because we'll be discussing it next Monday with the notice of motion that's coming forward, or next Tuesday.
Thank you, Councillor Croson. I had thought about that, but they are two different. Yours is about debating it. What Councillor Morrow has put forward here is to actually prescribe it. Madam City Clerk, sorry.
Yes, I believe that's correct. It is 6 months. However, it would just be on the 1.82. There could be another motion with a different percentage, but for the most part, you wouldn't debate the same motion again. It would be out of order. This motion, I'm not sure, amends Councillor or Mayor Spearman's motion. Perhaps you could look at doing a motion arising after the amendment is done or a different amendment, but I'm not sure that this amendment amends the mayor's amendment.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to make a decision then as the chair that this amendment does materially change the intent of the original resolution and is actually new conversation for council. Great conversation we need to have, but is new conversation. So I would, although it has been made and second, I don't have the authority now to rule it out of order. Thank you. It takes me that long to process, so thank you. Councillor Morrow.
So I'm hearing, and I want to make sure that this is clear. I'm hearing that we seem to be sending this to administration. I look at it as different. Basically, what this is saying, the mayor's intent was that we save the taxpayer for this year based on COVID, in essence. So the average household is going to save $42. What I'm saying, and I agree with that, but if we're going to take it and then move it on to the next year, we really haven't saved the taxpayer any money. To me, I look at it as this is now back to us as council. We're gonna do this one time, as the mayor's resolution is, for this year, where it goes from 1.82 to 0. The remaining 2 years are gonna stay at 1.82. Council now will, from now, starting tomorrow, if we want to, we can continue to have this discussion and work with our administration on how we can do whatever it is we need to do to try and keep that, the following 2 years of taxes at 1.82. That's what I'm trying to get at. I don't see how this is the perfect time to discuss it. It's part of what we're doing. We are dealing with a tax bylaw. So whether this is here today or a month from now or whenever, I don't understand why it's so critical that some of you want to remove my amendment to a later date.
Point of order, the chair has ruled this out of order already.
It's already seconded.
It has been introduced and seconded. I did call for a seconding for the purpose of debate and deliberation. Any other questions from members of council on the amendment to the amendment? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to debate. Councillor Crowson, you are first.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I appreciate where Councillor Morrow is coming from. I think everybody wants to not only save the taxpayers' money now and in the future, but there is a process for it. Today is about short-term recovery. It's about what are we doing for this 2020 tax year, and that's the discussion we need to have. As I noted earlier, I do have a notice of motion that will be debated next week on Tuesday about opening the budget back up in November to have those conversations about the 2021 and 2022 budget. If we do it in November and do it in a very logical way, we'll be looking at the midterm and long-term recovery. I've done my research on past recoveries, both historic and modern ones, and we have to think of this in a very logical fashion. So I don't think we should be making the decision today. We need to do it in a thoughtful manner, which is why I brought forward the notice of motion 2 weeks ago or whenever, so that we do this thoughtfully. So I cannot support this amendment. I like where it's going, but there's a better process to do it under.
Thank you, Councillor Crowson. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Again, at the risk of repeating my colleague who just spoke, I won't be supporting this amendment. I do appreciate the discussion, but I think it's appropriate to have that discussion with full data, full input from our citizens, and full knowledge of what we're actually doing. Just doing it knee-jerk is what it appears to be. This amendment like this does not make sense. But we do need to look at things. I know that our city manager has been very upfront with us, saying that it's very likely she definitely can find the 2.8 for this year because we're in a crisis. But we had thorough discussions with our community, with ourselves, through Finance Committee to set the budget for the next year. The amendment will materially impact that and change that with no discussion with the community, with no discussion amongst ourselves about how that will impact. So I cannot support this amendment. I do support the original motion and the intent of that to do one-time injection of funding to help our taxpayers. But I think we need to do our due diligence. We need to do thoughtful and intelligent work, not just a spur-of-the-moment knee-jerk reaction. So I will not be supporting this amendment, but I will be supporting the original motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Councillor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think I'll not speak.
Thank you. Any additional members for debate? Hearing none, Councillor Morrow to close debate.
Wow, this is interesting. We need full input from citizens. Knee-jerk reaction. Well, let me tell you, the resolution, the amendment where we eliminate the 1.82 for this year and bring it to 0, but then we're going to add it on next year. I can tell you that if you ask any citizen, which I have done, They don't want that. If you're gonna want me to pay 1.82 this year and 1.82 next year, then you might as well just let me pay it. What I'm trying to do with this resolution, this is totally helping the taxpayer, because we are now eliminating 2.8 million, 5.6 million, 8.4 million, however you guys want to add that up. And I'm not even saying we're eliminating that. All I'm suggesting by this amendment is we're going to go to 0 for this year, and then next year and the year after remain at 1.82. Pretty simple. It doesn't mean that look what we're doing right now. We're talking about this. We're going to hear from our administration about all the services, reduction in services or whatever else is going to happen from today until this COVID thing is done, which this could be another 2 years. So all I'm saying is until we totally have an understanding of the services, of the savings that we have because of not providing those services, why is anybody hesitating in not keeping next year and the year after's taxes at 1.82? That's what we've approved. Now, we're taking away this 2.8 million today, which is the 1.82, so all I'm saying is that we at some point, which the notice of motion clearly tells us, we will be discussing this. And that 1.82 of next year and the year after could be 0.82, could be 5.0. We don't know. So all I'm trying to do is send a message to the community, look, it's going to be 0 this year, and rest assured, as of now, as of today, it's 1.82 for the next year and the year after. Council will then meet, and the onus will become on us. And at that point, I think, is when we can have a lengthy discussion and input from our citizens. This is not a knee-jerk reaction. This is basically doing what we're all trying to intend to do, and that is help the taxpayer and make them understand that I'm going to use it again because I've used it throughout this thing. You can pay me now or pay me later, and I don't want to have them pay me later. And that's, if we don't do this, and we don't approve my amendment or the mayor's amendment, then that's exactly what we're doing. We're going to get their money no matter what. So I'm asking for support for this.
Thank you. Question has been called. Madam Clerk will do a roll call on the vote.
Councillor Morrow. Councillor Miyashiro.
Opposed.
Councillor Parker. Councillor Campbell.
For.
Councillor Carlson.
Opposed.
Councillor Crowson.
Opposed.
Councillor Hagan.
Support.
Deputy Mayor Kaufman.
Opposed.
Mayor Spearman. It's lost, 6-9.
Thank you. Back to the original.
Sorry, 6-3 to make.
6-3, yeah.
I was going to question those numbers.
Back to the original resolution. I believe we had finished questions, and now time to move into debate. Mayor Spearman.
Thank you. This is an unusual year. Expenses will be down for things like travel. Other ongoing expenses we've heard will be saving funds on community facilities. In the last 6 years, the city of Lethbridge has had a surplus of about $2 million a year on average. 2014, it was $2,257,000. 2015, $1.989 million. 2016, $2.127 million. 2017, over $3 million. 2018, $3.47 million. And in 2019, $2.145 million. So we have a history of having surpluses. There's no guarantee that would take place this year, of course, this being an unusual year. But the city manager has said that she could find $2.8 million this year. I think this is a difficult year for many taxpayers. And anything we can do, we have not said to any taxpayer that we would be forgiving their taxes. What we said, we would be delaying their payments. Anything we can do to minimize the tax increase, and in this year, I think this would be an ideal year for it to be zero. Don't forget, this isn't about taxpayers with an average house value of $268,000. It's about businesses that pay 2.3 times the municipal tax rate as well. Those businesses are struggling. I think a zero tax increase is, if there was a year to do it, this is a year to do it. We have committed to the administrative reviews. Let's hope that there are some significant savings identified and implemented as a consequence of those reviews. And let's do what we were asked to do by many in the community a year and a half ago, which was to lower the tax rates in Lethbridge, Alberta, so we're not the second highest taxed municipality in the province of Alberta. So I think this would be a good step forward, and with that, I'll open for others to debate.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Acting Mayor Parker.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. And, first of all, I want to thank the Mayor for bringing this resolution for this amendment. I think we hear the words that our city manager is going to just find this amount of money. I didn't hear that at all. I heard what the city manager and the city management team are. They're going to try their very best to find some savings within the corporation based on the direction council gives them. I didn't hear anything that there's some magic pot or some money that was there. And I don't think we should infer that at all, because there's going to be some tough decisions that will have to be made if this resolution is passed. So, but also, I also appreciate the fact that Councillor Morrow's comments earlier in regards to the year after that. I think when March comes around, when we have some actuals of how much money has been saved through some of the things we've been facing through COVID-19 and some other decisions that our senior management team, tough decisions that they're going to have to make, we'll be making a more well-informed decision, and hopefully we can do that next March when we get the actuals from our Department of the Treasury, not Department of Treasury, rather our Finance Department. So at that time, we will be able to make a decision on the following year in regards to what we are going to do tax. But I think we're basing our decision on the information we have now, and that's why I see the 0%. So I think I think the citizens understand we have to make tough decisions, just like they have to make tough decisions at home. So I think we can make future tax reductions or changes when we have more concrete information, which we can do early, hopefully next spring. But for the reasons that were stated earlier and from the information we heard through the city manager's office, and I appreciate her team, they have to make some tough decisions moving forward. If this resolution is passed, I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Parker. Councillor Crowson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I will absolutely be supporting this amendment. We said this is $42 savings for an average house, but we know it's much more in savings for a business or someone with an above-average house. But there's also the psychology that we have to think about. No one is always logical about their money, well, except for maybe Ms. Pinkston, our city treasurer. The rest of us certainly aren't always logical about our money. And there is something that we react psychologically to money. And I love the psychology of the 0%, because this is letting our residents and our businesses know that your city is supporting you and that we are aware of what is happening. We know some people have lost their jobs, no businesses are suffering, and we are going to make sure that this year it is 0% if this amendment passes. We, of course, have to balance our responsibility to the corporation as well as our responsibility to the taxpayers, so we can look at future years going ahead. We will have the KPMG, the second report's coming too soon, and I certainly wanted us to be able to make changes in a very planned fashion, but this might kickstart us, might get us to do a more thorough review of all of our operations, and I believe that if we do the short-term recovery stuff now, as we get into midterm and long-term, hopefully we will review the operating budget in November, and I have complete belief that through this crisis, we can actually make our municipal government emerge more effective, efficient, and resilient if we do this in a planned, thoughtful manner with the best information. So as I said, I will support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Crowson. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Much has been said. I won't repeat it. I just simply want to add my support to this amendment. I'd also like to thank the mover, Mayor Spearman, for bringing this forward. I think it's incumbent on all of us to do what we can for the community. As with the earlier resolution about the BRZ levy, this is one thing we can do in this year of ongoing challenges to try and help residents and businesses alike. The city manager has given me great comfort and great confidence that she can find this one-time dollars through either savings that we're not incurring at the moment, or in worst case, possibly through a reserve. And that's what a reserve is for. It is kind of a rainy day fund, and although it's cloudy outside right now, it is raining in our community, and we need to support our community as best we can. So thank you, Mayor Spearman, for bringing this forward, and you have my full support.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Councillor Hagan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So obviously we're having this has been quite the debate, and it's kind of a little mind-boggling, to be very honest, but I see that where Mayor Spearman you're going with is to a 0% increase. We are still, again, going to be paying this. It's just, we're just pushing it down further down the road, and so that we're not getting a 0, we're just going to get double it next time. You talk about Councillor Crozan spoke about the businesses. I'm one of those businesses. And I'll tell you what, next year when I get a double bill, because we're going to just put it off this year, when you're just starting to maybe, if you do get out of this, if you manage to get out of it, you're going to be hit with a double tax bill next year. I don't know how many of you are business owners in here, but it's a little bit of a struggle when you're just finally going to be able to make it that far. That's why having the previous resolution, that I obviously know that the amendment was not passed, would actually alleviate those stresses on business. So it is, I suppose I'm going to say it's going to be better than nothing, as we're still going to see a 0% increase, but be doubled next time. With frustration, I will be supporting this current resolution.
Thank you, Councillor Hagan. Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So this, to me, the intent of it is excellent. It looks really good. It looks like we are doing a phenomenal thing for the taxpayer, because we are eliminating the 1.82%, $42 for the average house. But what we're saying is we're going to add it to next year's and the year after that. So really, we're not helping any taxpayer with this at all, because they have to pay it. So earlier, we just heard all the reserves, the years that we've had with reserves. Earlier today, we used reserve money from Heart of the City to offset a tax levy for the downtown BRZ. Why can't we, with all these reserves, use reserve money to say to the taxpayer, we've collected a whole pile of extra money that rightfully belongs to you, and now you're not working, you're unemployed, you're struggling, you're this, whatever your struggles are for this year because of COVID. So we're not going to collect your tax this year, but we're going to hit you double hard next year, even though we have reserve money of yours. So using the same principle that we used earlier today, why don't we use the same principle? That was my point. If we are going to do anything for the taxpayer, because of COVID, because of whatever excuse you want to put forward for them to not have money in their pocket to be able to pay their taxes, then let's pay their taxes for them. And it's not even we're paying it for them. Let's use their money that they've already paid over to offset the taxes. If we do that, I would support this. I'd support this 100%. But what we're doing, you're not going to pay me today, but you're going to pay me later. When somebody tells me that, don't worry about it, you're going to pay me later. I'm sorry, I get chills, because I know that somewhere along the line, something's going to happen where in the end, I'm going to end up getting even more of a, I'm going to not use the word because I'm trying to be polite. So this resolution is a fluff resolution. It does nothing for the taxpayer. Just basically says, you don't pay us today, pay us next year. I'm not going to support it because we're doing nothing for the taxpayer, and it looks like we are, but we're not. So at this point in time, let's leave it as is. You shouldn't support this. Let's collect their $42, because that's probably the least amount of money that is affecting them. So let's leave that, and then when we have our other discussions regarding our operating budget and the remaining 2 years' taxes, and we'll have more information from our administration, then we can deal with the following 2 years and deal with the taxes and do it appropriately, which you guys are saying we're not doing it now. This, to me, is knee-jerk. This, to me, is saying we're doing a really good job, but you're not going to pay anything this year, but we're going to get you next year. I'm not going to support this resolution.
Thank you, Councillor Morrow. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. I think the 0% increase sends the right message at this time, both to maximize cash flow for residents and businesses and to help people know that the city is trying to make some adjustments. Council now, this is an opportunity to perhaps drive more innovation, efficiency, and some other opportunities. I think the city could have a year to find out ways to do that, and I will be supporting this resolution as it is right now.
Thank you. Councillor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Deputy. So I wasn't going to speak, but I heard a few things in the last few speakers that I think need to be addressed. I will support this because, for one thing, there's no certainty that we can't find enough money to cover this for this year. That was never said that we're going to absolutely double it next year. It's a possibility that it could double if we can't find the funding. I heard a colleague say that 0% means no taxes, and I'm pretty sure I heard that. So we got to be clear that 0% means no tax increase. Doesn't mean people aren't paying taxes. So I think people need to not propagate that at all. There was a few, at least two people thought that the taxes will double next year, and I think that has already been proven that that's not exact. And I think several people have said that the benefit to the business community for this year anyway will be enormous and probably better than homeowners. So I think we can do it for this year. Councillor Croson wants to put in a notice of motion to relook at the budget, which we can do at that time. But I think it's meaningful for us to do this for our taxpayers for this year.
Thank you, Councillor Miyashiro. I too will be supporting the resolution in its current form. I think what we're attempting to do here is take a very methodical approach to the current situation and how it's going to affect our residents, affect all of our citizens throughout the coming year. I think a zero increase is definitely the prudent thing to do. With the notice of motion that's on the books for deliberation at the next meeting, if council sees the wisdom, as I do, certainly, to proceed with that, we can then have a conversation about what 2021 and possibly 2022 would look like. At a later debate, we'll have obviously more information. We'll have a better understanding of where we are and what the other side of COVID looks like. I did speak earlier during the BRZ deliberation as well about systems and structures, and certainly situations like this, to me, remind me about some of my frustrations that I have with four-year budgets. Passing this budget in 2018 has left us looking at this budget in a certain way and trying to understand what 2021 and 2022 are going to look like. But that said, if we can come together and approve this particular resolution, we have the opportunity to further the conversation next Monday at Council. So I will be supporting the resolution as it stands. Mayor Spearman, to close.
Thank you very much. This is not business as usual this year. And if City Council deviates from its previously approved budget, recognizing the unique circumstances in 2020, that tells the community that it's not business as usual this year. To go ahead with the 1.82% increase, despite the fact that businesses and residential taxpayers are suffering to a great extent this year, really would say that Council is tone deaf. I think we do have a collective responsibility to review our expenses. The administrative reviews are one tool that will give us a lot of assistance, but we also have a collective responsibility as Council to look at alternatives that are proposed by our city manager to reduce expenses going on into the future. So I think we will take the time to do that. I think we have to start by providing clarity to the community. The tax bills do have to go out next week, and I think reducing the proposed tax increase from 1.82% to 0 for the 2020 tax year is the right thing to do, and I would urge my colleagues to support this amendment. Thank you.
Questions have been called. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call, please?
Councillor Miyashiro.
Support.
Councillor Parker.
Support the amendment?
Councillor Campbell.
In favor?
Councillor Carlson.
In favor.
Councillor Crowson.
In favor.
Councillor Higgin.
Favor.
Councillor Morrow. Deputy Mayor Kaufman.
Favor.
Mayor Spearman. It's carried 8-1.
Very much.
Thank you.
Have to do the main motion as amended.
Okay, we now have a motion by Councillor Miyashiro. Be it resolved that bylaw 6222, the 2020 property tax and supplementary property tax bylaw, as amended, be given second reading. Councillor Miyashiro?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I believe we've had enough debate on this right now. If there's any questions, I invite my colleagues to ask them now.
I see no questions in the queue.
Then I will save my debate for closing.
Okay, we're now in debate. Any debate on the amended resolution?
Carlson here.
Yeah. Councillor Carlson?
Sorry, Mayor Spearman, I couldn't email fast enough. I just want to add my support to this. This is a challenging situation our community finds itself in. We've made an adjustment to the tax collection this year. We are looking at 0% increase to our taxes this year to try and support our residents, our businesses, all of our citizens. This isn't going to preclude us from sitting down if Councillor Crowson's notice of motion comes forward, and I'm trusting it will come forward and hopefully get passed, that we can sharpen our pencils this fall and try and continue this trend for our citizens. So I do want to just clarify to everyone that because of the way taxes work, there still will be changes to your tax bill due to your assessment, but the municipality is collecting no more taxes this year than we did the previous year, and I'm in full support of that.
Thank you. Any further debate? I see none. I'll refer to Councillor Miyashiro to close.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. As we just voted on the amendment, overwhelmingly council supports the amended motion, so I ask for the vote.
Question's been called. I'll ask the city clerk to do the roll call.
Councillor Parker?
Favor?
Campbell?
Favor?
Councillor Carlson?
In favor.
Councillor Crowson?
In favor.
Councillor Higgin?
Favor.
Councillor Morrow? Councillor Miyashiro?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Kaufman?
In favor.
Mayor Spearman?
In favor?
Carried 8-1.
Thank you. I now have a motion from Councillor Higgin that we do now adjourn the May 11th.
Your worship, we have to do third reading.
Oh, third reading. Yeah, might as well. So we can send out the tax notices. Okay. All right. Thank you. And for third reading, from Councillor Miyashiro, be it resolved that bylaw 6222, 2020 property tax and supplementary property tax bylaw as amended be given third reading and that the mayor and the city clerk be authorized to sign and seal the same. Councillor Miyashiro?
Call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that motion carries. And now we have a resolution from Councillor Higgin that we do now adjourn the May 11th special meeting of City Council.
Question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Thank you. We will now move on to the CIC meeting after a 5-minute break.